Okay, thank you everyone for joining us on our webinar today. Today's webinar is brought to you by the HRIA, EWPA and TSHA. And one of the purposes of all three associations is to support our members' businesses to ensure that our industries remain as strong as possible. So stronger businesses within the industry result in a stronger industry. And one of the areas we often get asked about is recruitment. So how do we find staff? How do we retain staff? So I'm sure you'll all agree that the hire, access and telehandler industries are probably not ones that come top of mind when people think about that's the industry I want to get into. However, I'm also sure you'll agree that once you've worked in these industries, you probably think that people should be thinking of them because they're such great industries to work in. So how can we win the war for talent? So we're very lucky to have with us today Nina and Joe from Beaumont People to present a webinar on our recruitment on recruitment titled "When Every Candidate is a Purple Squirrel." Beaumont People are a specialised recruitment business that truly believes in placing people first. So they're the perfect partners to present for us today. So before we start, just a tiny bit of housekeeping. If time permits, we'll open up for questions at the end of the session. So if you have any questions, please pop them either in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll keep a look on those and we'll ask those questions to Nina and Joe at the end. And we do also have a couple of questions that came through when people registered. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website shortly. So please feel free to share this with other members of your team afterwards. So I'll now pass over to Nina and Joe. Thanks, Nina and Joe.
Thanks very much, and hello everybody. Lovely to be here, if not in person, at least virtually again. I think it's always a shame when I can't see the audience. I know that there are two of you out there that I know, so a particular hello to Jason and to Craig if you're watching. But yeah, lovely to be here. So as Sally said, my name's Nina and I'm the Managing Director at Beaumont People, and I'm here with my colleague Joe, who's one of our principal consultants who has over 10 years in recruitment and HR, so a wealth of experience to share with you today. We do encourage interaction, we do encourage questions. This is quite content heavy, this topic, so we will save the questions to the end, but feel free to put your comments in the chat, to put your questions in. We really encourage that. We always say go nuts, but be respectful. That's the kind of one rule of the chat, if you like to get it started and kick us off. But to start with, I will just do an acknowledgement of country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, Beaumont People acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past, present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. It'd be great to know where you're from, which part of the country are you in at the minute. If you know which part of the Indigenous part of the country you're in, then put that name down. If not, maybe the city or the town that you're in. I think I'm right on the border of Eora and Kurungai, so it's always hard to know which one to say when people ask me where I'm from, but good to get a sense of that. So before I get started into the actual topic, I just want to share some statistics. We currently are sitting at an unemployment rate, when I last looked at 4.6%, I think it's predicted, or just gone to 4.5%. That 4.6% figure is from July. The lowest it's ever been was 4% in February, just before the GFC. It's an incredibly low unemployment rate that we're sitting at a minute. And if you look at that graph, you can see that also if you look compared to the number of new jobs prior to when COVID hit, so you can see I've got there up to about February of 2020, unemployment was low, but there weren't a lot of new jobs being created in any substantial amount. But you can see we had a big kind of loss of jobs at the beginning of COVID. Everybody kind of slightly panicked and put everything on hold. We definitely felt that, didn't we, Joe? We kind of a real sense of clients not being sure what they wanted to do. But once people got their confidence back, the number of new jobs that were created was significant, and significantly more, as you can see, than pre-COVID hitting. So that's one of the things that's impacted the unemployment rate. But the other things are, there are a lot of people, and you might have read if you keep up with this in the press, a number of people that have opted out of looking for work at the moment with everything that's going on. I can imagine anyone that's homeschooling any more than one child has probably, and is not working, has probably decided not to start looking for work right now, for example. So a number of people that have opted out of the workforce. We have no immigration at the moment. We have no one coming in from overseas with skill sets or with experience that we're looking for, where we have some of the real talent shortages. But we also have no backpackers and no international students. And a lot of those candidates often kind of absorb some of the casual jobs or some of the other lower skill jobs, not always, sometimes the higher skill as well, but a real variety of jobs. There's none of that buffer happening at the moment. So we are in, and I've been in this industry for, I think it's either nearly 25 years, it might have just flipped over 25 years, let's not count. But I've been in this industry for a long time. I've never seen the market as tight as it is for good talent as it is right now, and it is tough right now. It's slightly different for different sectors, obviously, in different locations, but as a general rule of thumb, it's tight. And in our industry, we call that when every candidate is a purple squirrel, because I'm going to hand over to Jo, who's going to explain why we call that a purple squirrel. Over to you, Jo.
Thanks, Nina. That's right. This funny phrase, purple squirrel, essentially means that you are looking for the perfect candidate, i.e. Somebody who may not exist. So as we all know, squirrels are not purple. So you need to be thinking about, well, what are we looking for? And that's why we're here to help today. So a bit of an example, I want to talk about Sarah. Sarah is a senior communications coordinator in Sydney. She first registered with us for work in January 2019, and she was looking for 55,000 plus super a year. She was quickly placed into a role at 75,000. And in February 2021, when we came out of COVID, she left that role because she was headhunted into a position that paid 90,000 plus super. So in 18 months, Sarah had gone from 55,000 to 90,000 plus super. And similarly, we're seeing things like that as well happening in other industries, for example, the IT sector. So in early 2020, we placed a level 1 IT help desk role in the Gold Coast, and that was at 45,000 plus super. Just now, very recently, in the last few months, that same person has been headhunted, and they've been headhunted at 55,000 for the exact same role, but with a different organisation. So as you can see, if you're not paying people to the correct salary, if you're not valuing people, if you're not showcasing what else you can offer them, then other companies are, and people will move around. Nina. Oh, me. What will we cover today? So what we're going to talk about today is what's stopping you. So what's stopping you finding the right people in your business? What can you do to find the right people in your business? So what action can you take after this webinar to make sure that you are finding those purple squirrels that you need for your business? And what are the next steps from there as well? So we'll cover that today.
Great, thank you, Jo. So before we get started, we are going to get a little bit into what's stopping you. And I want to start by getting your feedback. Here's a fun game. You should all be used to QR codes now. If you scan that QR code, or if you don't have a QR code, you can just go to the website with the number there. And you can type in what is the main thing, or what are the main things that you think are stopping you being able to either hire or keep your great people. Obviously, in the examples that Jo just gave, the salaries had gone up quite substantially over the last year or two in certain sectors particularly. But what else do you think it is? What do you think, if you're attending this webinar, I'm assuming that you are having some challenges with this. So what is it that you think is stopping you from doing that? So if you're scanning that QR code and typing your words in, we should start to see that come up now. Jo, I might get you to also do it to make sure it's working. There is a little bit of a delay sometimes, but let's just see what comes up when people scan that and start putting words in. What is stopping you from doing it?
It's working for me. Okay,
great, there you go. They've got some answers coming up now live, fabulous. So yeah, lack of ability to pay what the market is commanding. Here we go, they're coming. It just takes a bit of a delay as people type them in. Really interesting. And any more, I'll just give it a few more minutes. So availability of experience, competition for candidates, hiring and finding appropriate applicants. Yeah, keeping, okay, that's good that you're retaining. Lack of ability to pay, expectations, culture, budget, yeah, the experience, absolutely. Budget, culture, yeah, these are really interesting to see. And what we know is, in a capitalist market like ours, candidates are a resource. And we know in any market, when the resource is scarce, you've really only got three options. You can either pay more for it, you can lower your expectations of what you're looking for, or you can wait longer to find the right thing. Think about when you're house hunting. If you're trying to buy a house, that's what happens in the housing market when there's a scarcity of houses, and it's no different with candidates. But what's fascinating, and the reason I love asking this question, is I like to compare it to what you think is there, and also what we see. If you imagine we interview upwards thousands and thousands of candidates every year in our business, and we ask every single one of them, why are you looking to leave your role? So we get to hear firsthand, what are the things that's making them think about leaving. And typically the ones that we see come up, and I just need to click on that to get to the next slide. These are typically the things that come up. So some of the similar sorts of things that you've said there: salary, yes; culture, location, the leadership. So nobody put leadership in there. So that's an interesting one. They want more career growth or personal development. They maybe feel like they're not getting enough recognition. Flexibility is definitely a big thing now. I can tell you, and I know that often in some of the industries that you work in, you don't have a choice in this matter, but candidates do want and have an expectation about working from home now, which never used to be the case, obviously, so that's a big one. Well, they might be looking for a career change, they might have a change in responsibilities, but they're the key things that we see come up. But what's interesting, and what Joe and I want to do with you today, is share with you the things that you can control, because some of those things you can't control. Some of them you have no control over what your competitors are paying, and you might not have the budget or the ability to pay more money to keep up with that. But the good news for you is that that's not the most important thing. We did a whole heap of research into this. And if you want to have a look into it, it's fascinating. Go to meaningfulwork.com.au. We did some research into what makes work meaningful for Australians. And the great thing is that everybody's path to meaningful work is unique. So what's meaningful for me might be completely different to what's meaningful for Joe. And so that means that what you need to do is find out the ways in which you provide meaningful work, and then how are you talking about that externally. But the great thing is that there are 3 aspects of work, meaningful work, that are the most popular. It's not that it's right or wrong, but they're the most popular that people have. And the first one of those things is having the trust of your managers, working for somebody that trusts you to get on and do your job. Now, that is not something that costs a penny. So the good news here is that you can create meaningful work in a way without having to spend any more money at all. The second one is culture, and we can see that that did come up there, and a couple of people, I think, recognize that in the previous slide. And the third one is work that makes a difference. Now, actually, almost all work makes a difference, but sometimes we're better at articulating it than others. Sometimes it's more obvious. If I work in a charity, it might be a bit more obvious about how my work is, making a difference to society. But all of our work makes a difference to society, because it wouldn't have existed in the first place if there wasn't a need. So how well are we articulating the way in which the work that you're doing makes a difference? So Joe and I are going to go through 10 tips with you today. The 10 very practical tips of things you can actually do to tweak your recruitment process. But before we get into that, I want you to think about the ways in which you're providing meaningful work and what you can do. Because as we go through these 10 tips, I want you to start thinking about, what does that mean for you and your specific organisation? Because the answer is going to be different for each of you. And you might find actually that some of these tips are really relevant, or 1 or 2 might be really relevant, and the others you might be doing really well. So let's get into this now, into the 10 tips, and start thinking about what you can practically do to kind of move that dial on getting better traction with your candidate attraction. So the first tip number 1, is absolutely think outside the box. If you are looking for a purple squirrel, what would a purple squirrel do? They don't exist, that's the point, right? But here's what we see happen so often, and Joe, I'm going to get you to nod along if you agree with this. I see this happen all the time. Let's say Betty has been with us 10 years, and Betty resigns. She's been with us 10 years. You know what normally happens once Betty resigns? Well, what typically we see happen is the hiring manager has a good old rummage around, either physically in the filing cabinet or on the files on the computer drive that nobody knows where everything's stored properly because nobody's sorted it out for years and years. And they find a job description for Betty. And they take that job description and they write an ad based on the job description, and they whack it up, probably on Seek or one of the other well-known job boards, and hope for the best. That's what we see a lot of people doing. Now, what's wrong with that, do you think? There's so many things wrong with that. And the great news is we're going to share all that with you today. So the first thing is that the job description you dug up probably wasn't even written for Betty. It was probably written before Betty started, and Betty's been in the role for 10 years. So it's very likely to be a very outdated job description. The chances of it matching what Betty was actually doing are slim. And further, what Betty was doing, whether that matches what you actually want someone to do, might be different again, because especially if somebody's been in a role for a long time, often we're just going through the motions of they're doing what they've always done. We're not looking at it with fresh eyes. So the thing to do is really think about, what point are we at as an organisation? What function did Betty fill? Is that a function we still want somebody to fill? We still want those functions done? If so, is it actually a person? Or is this a chance to change it completely? Could it be automated? Could it be outsourced? Could it be something that we really rethink how we're doing? Could it be split into different sections and duties and shared amongst existing teams? Could it be an opportunity for career growth for somebody internally? There might be all sorts of different ways that you could slice and dice what you're doing, and thinking about where is your organisation going in the next 1 to 3 years. So rather than knee-jerk just replacing like for like, what are you trying to achieve and what's the best way to get there? Because it's a great opportunity to have that moment of reflection. But it takes a bit of time and effort to do so, right? So really thinking about that moment of reflection to think about how you may do that. And then once you've got that, then you've got a bit more of an idea of what you're looking for before you even start looking. And that's a step that a lot of people don't go to. So that's the first tip for you. Jo, over to you for tip number 2.
Thanks, Nina. So yes, effective planning is key, and we see a lot of people getting excited and putting that ad up on Seek, and as Nina said with Betty, hoping for the best, but it really isn't your best way forward at all. So when you have a vacancy that you need to recruit for, I would encourage you to stop and just think about the plan and all the things that you need to plan before you get to the point of advertising this on Seek. So before you recruit, please plan properly. We all know that failure to plan is a plan to fail, but especially in this market is incredibly tight. Candidates are moving so fast and they have so many options that yours really needs to stand out. As a minimum, absolute minimum, make sure that the role's signed off. It blows my mind the amount of hiring managers I speak to, panicked phone calls, so-and-so's left, they've been here for so long. I had this just this week, brand new CEO, and the COO's leaving after 12 years. And he said, just quietly, I'm terrified. And I said to him, okay, is the role signed off with your board? No. Okay, so first things first, go and get the role signed off, including the salary, including where you can go to with the salary if you find the purple squirrel or close to. The position description, as well as Nina's touched on, make sure it's accurate and that it represents what you realistically need. So, of course, everybody has an ideal in their mind, but make sure that it is not just a list of your perfect person. Imagine, that if you filled maybe 70 or 80% of what you want in your job description, that would be a really good hire, and that's what you're aiming for. You also need to be really clear on the hiring process and who's going to be involved. And I have been here, guys. There is nothing worse than the person you're dealing with having to deal with the internal politics of another manager who thinks they should be involved in the interview process. It's messy, it's not time effective, it's not cost effective. So before you even think about advertising your role, make sure that you're very, very clear on who's going to be involved and at what stage. Make sure that you've also considered your internal applicants fairly. So make sure that you've looked at who you have in the team who might be interested in this role. Maybe you advertise it internally first before you go external as well. But make sure it is a fair process for everybody involved. And make sure you have a plan about how you will deal with people who might apply that clearly will not be right for this role as well. It needs to be fair and professional for all candidates involved, but including your internal candidates as well. And make sure that you've done some market research. And what we mean by this is it's very easy these days to find out the range that the kind of roles you're looking for are paying, your competitors, if they're advertising. You can hop on Seek, you can hop on the other job platforms and have a look. I would do that as a bare minimum. If you need more detailed information than Seek can provide, give us a call. If it's the kind of role that we deal with regularly, we will be able to help you. If not, we might be able to refer you to another agency that recruits the kind of roles that you need support with. Next slide. Thank you, Nina. So internally agree on the skill set of the candidate and any transferable skills. So this is the biggest challenge and most likely to lead to a purple squirrel search, which is what we want to completely avoid. Nobody is hired in isolation, but an internal mismatch of required skills can derail a recruitment process like nothing else. And you need to agree on this before you start meeting candidates, because otherwise the problem is you'll meet somebody that you really like And it's great to like your co-workers, but it doesn't mean they're necessarily the best person for the job. So you need to ensure that you've really talked internally about skill set and all the transferable skills that the person you need might have. And think about skills in terms of competencies instead of desirable skills. We see this phrase a lot on job descriptions and job adverts, and it sends a shiver down my spine, because if you imagine you're an accountant, for a minute, you're an accountant, and you're looking for a job, you've got 4 years experience and you've done a great job, you've been promoted, but you're ready for the next challenge. And every job ad you're looking at says essential skills must have 5 years experience. Well, maybe you've got 4.5 and you're not going to apply. And that company is going to miss out on you and your great skills just because they're sticking to their essential skills on their job ad. So make sure you don't fall into that. And the way to avoid that is by using competency. Now, competency is a fundamental knowledge, ability, or expertise in a specific subject area, or more simply, it's a specific business strength. So if we were recruiting for Nina's position, we would have a core competency in the job description and on the job advert. One of those would be leadership. So that is something that somebody would need to demonstrate at interview stage, but you can't necessarily sort of define by time frame. So you might say demonstrated leadership skills over must have 10 years leadership experience, and that will mean that you're keeping the door open for some absolute superstars who are on the way up as well. And competencies can be technical skills, so you guys might need people with certain technical skills in your roles, so absolutely pop those in, but again, don't limit them to time frame or a particular qualification. If you can teach them, state that in your job ad or your job description. They might be behavioural competency, so you might need people who are exceptionally good at working to your company values and ethics, and that might be something you're focusing on at the moment. And also values-based competencies. If your company is wanting to hire people that have the same values as the rest of the team because you've got a great thing going, or you might need to tweak the culture, then that's something that you can also look for. Challenge yourself on essential versus desired skills and minimise what's essential whilst prioritising the values and behaviour-based ones as well. When you minimise your essential criteria, you open the door to more candidates, and that's going to give you a better chance of filling the role with a great person. And the third, I think we're on third tip, is fourth tip, be flexible with your expectations. So once you have planned and written a great advert, you need to know exactly what you're looking for. The trouble is that it will match what everybody in the room is looking for and across the broader region. Ironically, guys, I've got some construction outside. It's really loud for me, so I hope you can't hear that. So apologies if you can hear there's some kind of digger going on. They're building a whole unit block next to me. And you may not have the budget for top dollar, or your culture might be going through a culture shift, or you might quietly know that the person or the candidate they're reporting to maybe isn't a great leader. So how do you overcome these things? We would say be flexible. And you can be flexible on a lot of things, including dollars. Go up to, what can you genuinely go up to in terms of salary? So if we did find the purple squirrel, if you did find an absolute superstar, is there somebody else in a competitor's business that if they applied for your role, you'd say, oh yes, we would take them and we would pay them 10,000 more a year? So really think about what if the person was amazing, and what if they brought in revenue or money into the business as a result of what they were doing because they were doing it so well? Could you afford to pay more then? Have a think about those kind of things, and that might give you a little bit more flexibility around your expectations as well. Other benefits, because we don't always have the budget to pay people in salary, but what could you offer instead of dollars? Could you offer additional annual leave? Could you offer training and development, which we hear from candidates all the time is high on their list and key? Could you offer parking, shares in the company, salary packaging? Have you sat down and listed all the benefits that there are of working for your organisation? And then are you selling them enough? Something I always ask my clients when I take a job brief for them is, why do you work for the company you work for? Why are you still here? What makes you get up and come to this job every day? And I've had all sorts of answers, but very, very rarely, in fact, I think never has anybody said to me the money. It's all about the culture, the people, the leadership, the training, the social barbecues, location close to home, flexibility. I've got kids at home. We hear a lot of that. So, experience. Do you really need everything that you think you need the person to do in your original wish list? I would really challenge that, and I would really think, why are we saying this is essential? Why are we saying this one's essential? To go through your list and make sure that you really are listing essential criteria as the smallest amount of criteria you're looking for, and your others are much more flexible. If it's hours as well, and I know some of you will have set hours and that can't be changed, but it might be worth asking yourselves as well, could it be part-time? Could it be a job share? Could it be flexible hours? And that's an important one, because we know from experience that people who are looking for part-time work will simply not apply if it doesn't say we would consider part-time, job share, flexibility, because, you know, who wants to get a job rejection? And that actually means that a large part of the workforce is being ignored, and often, you know, people have really, really strong talents and they're not even going to be applying for the job. So if you can be flexible, be flexible. We also like you to think about, what are your sourcing strategies? And if we had the time, I'd ask you, and I know that the majority of the answer would be Seek. And that's great. And Seek is a great place to find candidates that are looking for work, but it is not the only place to find candidates that are looking for work. We touched on this earlier, but don't forget about your internal candidates. These are people that already know your business, they know your customers, they know your co-workers. Hopefully they're already doing well in your business. So think before you advertise, is there anybody that we'd like to approach and ask if they're interested in a sidestep, a secondment, a trial, before you go out to market? Because it might be easier for you to fill their role and they step into the one that you've got the gap in. Advertising, yes, you can advertise online. Seek and other job boards are very effective, but what about your website? What about asking your association if they would advertise for you? Most associations have job boards as well on their website, so definitely get in touch with your association, as they are your network. Recruitment agencies, why not? Let's touch on that as well. We are here to support you and help you. It's worth having a recruitment agency up your sleeve, but make sure that you are working with a recruitment agency that you feel understands you and understands your business needs. Any agency could tell you they've got candidates for you, but you really need somebody to work with you, partner with you, understand what you need, be able to challenge you on your essential criteria and your wish list for your purple squirrel, if necessary as well. And don't forget about things like trade magazines as well that people might be looking in. Social media is always great, depending on the role. You might want to use Facebook or even Instagram if you're looking to attract younger people or graduates into the business, or it might be that LinkedIn's more appropriate for you depending on the level of the role. Not to say any young people use Facebook, but you might want to choose the appropriate social media stream for the person that you're trying to attract. Headhunting as well. A lot of people that we place into roles aren't actively looking, and this is what we call our passive candidates. So if you have a competitor and you know that there's an absolute star of a manager, project manager, COO, whatever, and you want them, consider talking to them. Because at the very worst, they're going to be flattered and say, no, thank you, I'm happy where I am. At the best, they might be interested in your role and having a chat. So I would definitely think about approaching people that you would want. If they're not interested in your role for whatever reason, then I would also ask them, do you know anybody else that's worth me speaking to, whether they're looking or not? And is there anyone else you can refer to me? It's amazing, isn't it, Nina, how often we fill a role from, oh, well, my neighbour's friend's daughter's, whatever is looking for a job. And I've got quite a few people out on my temp books at the moment that have come to me that way. So use your own networks, ask your husband, ask your wife, do you know anyone that's looking? Use your own Facebook. I regularly post jobs on my own Facebook page, especially if they're in the local area. And I've often filled roles with friends of friends that way as well. So The other thing I would say is if you're recruiting fairly regularly, consider keeping your own version of a database. Now, we have a very sophisticated CRM database. I'm not suggesting you need to go and spend money on that, but it might be worth you keeping an Excel spreadsheet or similar of candidates that have come to you in the past. If a candidate's come for you and they've not been quite right for the job at the time, they may well be right for the job a couple of years later or come back round to you and their situation's changed. So it might be worth sending out an email blast to people that have applied to your roles in the past that haven't been right for whatever reason, but might be right now. So make sure that you're keeping good record details as well of people, and that can be a really nice way to bring people into the business that maybe won't be seeing your Seek ad as well. And don't forget about your website as well, that you're going to have you know, an advert on your website that's going to attract people to you, and they get a sense of a feel of what you're like as a company to work for as well while they're there. Thanks, Nina.
Thank you, Jo.
Yeah, thank you. So we've seen a lot of terrible adverts, and honestly, the worst ones, I mean, we have to share them with each other. They're so bad sometimes. But, you know, I think the biggest thing that I always say to clients when I think about job adverts is this is not about you. This is about the person. So you need to attract the person to you. You're selling your company, the job, your culture. Above all else, you need to attract people to you. This is not about if you haven't got 5 years, if you haven't done this, if you haven't done, then don't bother applying. Oh, and we won't get back to you if you've applied. So we see a lot of bad ads, and my main thing would be you need to write a job advert for the job board forums that really attracts the candidate and that is from the candidate's point of view, not your point of view. So when the candidates have a choice, they'll be put off by a bad advert, but not bad enough to not apply. Why? Well, it's really easy, as we all know when we're job hunting, that it's really easy to click apply. And if you're just uploading a resume, it can take 2 seconds. And they just want a job and they want to cover all their bases. So a lot of people will apply to jobs they don't even want. So don't get too excited. If you've written a bad ad and you've got a good candidate, they might come and see you for you know, an initial chat or an interview, but it might not be the right person for you still. They're judging you from day one. So the first impression counts. So when they're applying for your job, they're looking for things like flexibility, culture. Yes, pay is important. Location. What can I get from it? Training and development. Why should I work for you? So when you write your job ad, you need to read it back and check that it is really selling what is good about your business. Some quick top tips. Make it conversational, not formal. I wrote a job ad recently for my associate recruitment consultant that resulted in a great hire. And I wrote in the job ad, this is not for the faint-hearted. We are fast-paced and demanding, but in return, you will work for a high-performing team. So I quote that at her almost every week. And I think it's important to put some flair into your job ads. You know, all the job ads look the same on Seek when you're looking for a job. So make sure that you're doing something that's simple, effective, but conversational and sets the tone. Make sure that you include your company name, the role title that you've pre-agreed, the requirements of the role, so what you're looking for, and the benefit to the candidate. Check the job advert for the tone, the language, and anything discriminatory, including things like must have 5 years experience. So we don't want to discriminate against anyone, including based on their experience. Make it easy for them to apply. So Seek and Things does make things very easy, but we also always include our email at the bottom, a personal email. I prefer that to a info@ or a hello@, but that's your choice. And a phone number. So it doesn't have to be your direct line, but it could be a general line. And the really smart candidates will want to email or give you a quick call to talk to you, maybe even before they apply. So make it easy for people to apply as well.
Thank you, Jo.
And how would you run an effective recruitment process? Have you planned the number of steps involved? The amount of times that we have people come to us and say, I need a new operations manager. Okay, when? Next month. Okay, most people in an operations manager role will have at least a 4 weeks notice period. Some will have 12 weeks. So make sure that the first thing you do is be clear on the steps that are involved, and then work the dates backwards as well. It might be that you discover that you needed to start recruiting yesterday, but don't let that make you rush the process. Be clear on your interview questions and the process. Will you do a phone screen, a quick 5 minutes with the candidate first? Will you do one interview, two interview, a panel interview? You need to be sure about these things before you pick up the phone and get excited and start talking to the perfect candidate or your purple squirrel. Ensure that your interview questions match your criteria and that you know how to assess them. And look, the fairest way to do that is with a points system, so that you don't fall into what we call the halo effect. The halo effect is when you love a candidate, they're great, you've really clicked with them, their personality is great, they support the same footy team as you, they live down the road to your best mate, and you go, yeah, I want to hire them. And you want to hire them because you like them, that's great. But it doesn't mean necessarily they can do the job. They might just be really good at interviewing, and bear that in mind. So if you have a criteria that is linked to your job descriptions in your assessments, then you will be able to follow that through and mark every candidate off against the criteria, and that will ensure that the process is fair for everybody involved, including your internal applicants. Make sure that you know who will take which part of the process. If two of you are interviewing, please discuss whether you're asking the first question, the second. Make sure that you've planned that. Set aside time to review and provide feedback in a timely manner. Your brand is at stake. If somebody spends the time feeling nervous, prepping their cover letter and resume, maybe buying a new pair of shoes or a suit for their interview with you, or whatever it might be in your industry, and they interview with you and then they never hear back, they will remember your brand for all the wrong reasons for the rest of their life. And we hear this, oh no, I won't work for them. I applied for a job 15 years ago and I had to do X, Y, Z and jump through these hoops and they never even got back to me. I think it would mean, you might agree, that it's one of the pet peeves of our candidates that we see as well. So make sure that you know how, when and who is giving the feedback after the interview. Make sure you've got a really good interview room organised, prepared, booked out, so there's no clashes, obviously, in a post-COVID world. Make sure if it's online that you have got the Zoom or whatever you're using to interview booked out, and that no one else is going to hop in the middle of an interview. We've had that happen as well. And make sure that you're organised and on time for things like that, because first impressions do count and your candidates will be interviewing at multiple other places. Make sure that you've trained everybody appropriately on how to interview. If you need support with this, then reach out to us, because we do run more detailed training on that. And include references and make sure that they're done well. Again, if you struggle with that, you can talk to us. If you need any kind of psychometric testing or skills testing or permits or anything that you need in your industry, make sure that that's on the checklist as well, including background and working rights. At the moment, as Nina said, we haven't got the influx of approximately 135,000 people coming into the country to work. But when we return to normal and the borders open, make sure that checking your working rights is a really strong part of your recruitment process as well. And don't forget about things like the halo effect, gut feel, things like that, because they do influence you and you need to make sure that you are assessing people fairly. Nina.
Thank you, Jo. I like that piece around the kind of setting up the interview process, so important. We had some feedback recently from a client who had been doing a Zoom interview, and the candidate came off it and said they weren't interested in me at all. They spent the whole time looking at their emails, looking at their phone, not engaged on the Zoom interview. And actually, the client was interested in the candidate, but the candidate had just self-selected out by that point. But equally, even if the client wasn't interested, you want to make every candidate feel really good about their interactions with you, because that's your brand. As soon as somebody says, oh, I'm going for a job with such and such, you don't want other people saying, oh, I interviewed with them, they treated me terribly. So I couldn't really know the things you were saying there, Jo. Okay, let's talk about making and negotiating an offer, because we can put an awful lot of work in to get to this point. You've probably got a sense from what the tips that Jo's just gone through that it's pretty more work than often we realise. And you put an awful lot of work in to get to this point and still mess it up at this point. And we see this happen more often than it should. So it's definitely worth having this conversation to be really clear. The first thing I would say about this is that the time to find out what a candidate's expectations are around their salary is not at the time you're making the offer. That's a
Nina,
conversation.
can I just pause you? I'm so sorry. We're having a little problem with your audio. You've gone very crackly. I don't know whether there was an issue when I was talking as well, but you were fine earlier and now you're very in and out, and people just mentioning in the chat. Sorry, guys, we'll just look into this. Oh, I was fine. Okay.
Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
I've taken you off my headphones, maybe the battery. I apologise. The microphones are good on my headphones, but if the battery was running out, it might have been that. My apologies.
Sorry to interrupt you, Nina.
That's right, that's why we have two of us for exactly these reasons. So I was just saying, the point at which you want to find out what a candidate is expecting from a salary perspective is not the time at which you make the offer. You want to start that conversation early, but there's a real nuance to how you have that conversation, because there's a friend of mine who rang me for advice once, rang me and said, Nina, can I pick your brains? Because I've just had a recruiter I don't know call me and headhunt me for a role. But the first question they asked me was, what's my salary? And I felt like it was a bit like they were asking me to, you know, give it away before I'd even been on the first date, were the words he used. And I was like, yeah, there's an art to it. They need to know, but there is an art to having that conversation. So you don't go really in, you know, with kind of what exactly are you after, but it's good to start from the very beginning. What are you currently on? What are your expectations? What are you looking for? You don't need to get into detail. You don't need to debate, you know, how close you're going to get to each other, but you want to know that you're in the same ballpark. Because if you're not in the same ballpark from the beginning, again, the time to have that conversation is not when you make the offer. By the time you make an offer, you should know if they are going to accept the offer. And if they're not going to say immediately yes, and that's okay, you should know why they're not immediately going to say yes. It doesn't mean you won't make the offer, but you should not be surprised by the answer you get at the time that you make the offer. So it might be that they're considering other things and you've already discussed that with them. It might be that you've discussed all the way through that they're looking for 80 and you can only go to 70, but you are going to make the offer at 70 as you've discussed with them all the way through. That's your max, but here are the other things you're doing instead. You know, there might be reasons why it's not an immediate yes. The whole point is the surprise element shouldn't be in it at this point of the conversation. The thing that's really important as well, and this is the biggest mistake we see people make, is your offer fair and reasonable? i.e., does it match the previous conversations you've had all the way through? And it's nothing worse from our perspective when we're working with a client and a candidate and we say all the way through, the candidate wants 60k, the candidate wants 60k, the candidate wants 60k, and the client says, okay, no problem, no problem, no problem. And then they come to the offer and they say, we'd like to offer them 55k, please. And the reason that's not good is because even if the candidate says yes at that point, they are starting a brand new role with you feeling slightly duped. Imagine how you would feel if you had been honest about your expectations, and only after you've done all the interviews and all the discussions and the references, and only at that point did they say, okay, but we're going to offer you 5k less. It's okay to say that right at the beginning. It's not okay to say that right at the end. So that's why a negotiation is not a one point in time conversation. So make sure you're going through that. But also, when you make the offer, be really clear about all of the other benefits, so that it's not just about salary. Salary was way down on the list of factors for meaningful work. It is important, yes, but for most people, once they get to a certain amount, that's not actually the thing that decides. And sometimes the thing that makes them decide is actually on offer elsewhere, but the other people haven't talked about it as much. It is important, though, that you don't oversell. And this is really, so we've talked a lot, Joe's talked a lot about selling your organization, selling your role, but you need to, don't say you've got a great culture if you haven't got a great culture. Because there's nothing worse, again, than kind of making that offer and negotiating through it and then it not turning out to be true. What you say is, we are in a transition phase with our culture. We're doing some really exciting work on it. We've got a way to go, and we're looking for people that want to be part of that journey. We're looking for those people that want to look back and go, hey, look at where we go, look at how far we've come. Isn't that exciting? Are you up for that kind of challenge? You can make anything sound exciting and good if you phrase it the right way, but you don't pretend it's something that it's not, is the point. So make sure that you're including all of the benefits when you're talking about the offer. And here's my biggest tip to you is, if possible, and obviously at the moment that may not be possible, but if possible, make your offer in person. Invite them in, have the conversation with you in person or for a coffee, and if not, do it virtually, at least so that you're looking at them, because that visual of what their facial expression does when you make the offer will tell you way more than their words will. And you're much better to address it and get that in the moment if you can, and kind of deal with any kind of questions or concerns. Whatever you do, don't email them the offer until you've at least had a verbal conversation. If you have to do it by phone, that's better than just straight email, but if you can do it either in person or at least where you can see the other person virtually, that would be a really good thing to do. And think about, if you are going to have to negotiate, if you know, and you should know if you've done this properly, that you're going to have to negotiate, that there might be some stuff that you've kind of come up with, then hopefully you're actually, really all you're doing is presenting it as a solution to an ongoing discussion at that point. But if not, think about what could you negotiate with if you don't have more money to play with. Is it more annual leave? Is it more training and development? Is there, you might be able to put a bonus or an incentive scheme in place. We work with a customer service organisation, just purely inbound customer service. It's not a sales role, but they've started putting in, they can't do more on the salary front, but they have put some bonuses in for their highest performers, and that's made a difference, for example. We talked about all the different things you can be flexible on, but think about what can you do to try and sweeten it. And just think about how you can get them over the line. Do this all the way through so that when you make the offer, you're clear on what's happening. You've got more of a chance. You will still occasionally lose them, but you've got much more of a chance of getting them over the line. Make sure you know if they've got anything else they're looking at and how it compares. And also make sure you've had a conversation with them about counter offers. Counter offer is where the organisation they work with goes back to offer them a higher salary after they've accepted your role. If you are working with a recruitment agency, if you're working with us or somebody else, they will manage all of this for you. They're skilled at doing this. They do this all the way through. So do work with them in coordination for that. But if you're doing this for the first time, plan it. Make sure you know what you're doing, how you're doing it. Okay. Number 9, tip number 9. This is almost as bad as doing all the work and then messing up at the offer stage. That's doing all the work, getting them to agree, getting them to start, and then messing it up in their first 3 months in the job. There's some really interesting kind of theory behind this, attachment theory. It's the same theory for parenting, but it works in the workplace too. And the first 90 days is crucial in terms of forming that attachment bond from a workplace perspective. My worst role that I ever worked in personally was with an organisation. They will remain nameless, but I walked in on my first day and it was a building that had no reception. It was, sort of one of those ones you're walking around, there was nobody there. I was looking for people. It's kind of, should I, hello, I'm a bit nervous. It's my first day. It's quite a long time ago in my career. And eventually somebody sort of looked up over the, over the little dividers, meerkat-like from their little office cubicle, can I help you? I said, oh yeah, I'm here for my first day. And they were, oh, sorry, who are you? I said, oh, my name's Nina. They're like, oh, yeah, our boss isn't here. We didn't know you were starting today. Do you want to just have a seat over there and I'll see what I can find out for you? And in this little corner, sat there, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour later, I'm getting quite worried. It's my first day. I'm thinking, what if they think I'm a slacker? I'm not doing anything. So I kind of wander around again and I find the person to help me and I said, I'm sorry, I don't mind, but I'm just sort of sitting there on my own. Should I be doing anything? I said, oh, as I said, our boss didn't tell us you were starting today. No one knows where she is. We can't get hold of her. Do you want to go and just have a coffee over the road and we'll grab you once we've managed to get hold of her? So I did. Suffice to say, I lasted a year in that role, and that was 11 and a half months too long. A bad induction, a bad welcome can make much difference. We are actually running a whole webinar on this coming up shortly. I'll show you a slide in a minute if you're interested in that. But the key things, just the basics, have them set up properly on their first day. Have somebody that knows they're coming or starting virtually, meet and greet them, looking after them. Make sure they know who their team are, make sure the team know who they are. If you are physically working together, make sure you organise something for lunch for them on the first day so they're not sort of sitting and not knowing what to do. Ensure there's a really good solid plan for their first 3 weeks. That's kind of the bit that it takes people to get used to what's happening, and check in with them on a regular basis. And then after their first 3 weeks, make sure they know what's expected of them through their kind of probation period, giving them feedback, both positive and constructive. We work with an organisation called SORC Human Capital, and they provide a tool called the Employee Attachment Inventory, which measures all the drivers of attachment if somebody recruits through us. This is a tool that we include complimentary as part of the induction process to measure at the 90-day mark how attached they are to the organisation. It makes such a difference to get a sense of how it's going, and that's actually Anthony Sork from SORC Human Capital that's going to be doing the webinar for us in a few weeks. But make sure you get this right. Don't do all the work and the effort and then mess it up once they start. Bad attachment, bad kind of engagement, they don't often leave immediately, but they will leave in the 6 to 18 month mark. And that's kind of the point at which they're just starting to add value in most organisations. So really have a think about that. And then our final tip before we move to wrapping up on questions is the best thing you can do to really improve your attraction process is minimize the number of times you actually have to attract new people by reducing your staff turnover and your retention by looking after your top performers. The better you look after your people, obviously the less you actually have to recruit, but also the more you've got people internally helping and talking about your great culture and adding to it. So do look after your top performers, but I want to just caveat that there's a difference between looking after your top performers and pandering to them. Because pandering to your top performers can actually create the complete opposite of the culture that you're probably trying to create. You know, and we all have seen, let's use sports examples, sports teams where there's, you know, maybe one player that's the kind of prima donna of the team, actually can often come at the cost of the whole team. So look after your top performers, but not at all costs. Listen to them, spend time with them, recognize them, ask them what they want, consider their requests, you know, listen to them. And if you can actually act on their requests, then do. If you can't, that's fine, but take the time to explain why. So hopefully they've understood it. And I'll give you an example, something we implemented internally at Beaumont People, we do now for everybody. We have one of our top performers been with us a long time. In fact, she started on the same day that Joe started, and she was terrible at taking her annual leave, never took her annual leave, and we wanted her to take her annual leave. And so one year we kind of went, what can we do about this? And we realized that she reached quite a big milestone in terms of her performance. And so we recognized her performance with some travel vouchers to go away. This was obviously pre-COVID, to go away. And she got to go away on us, and we gave her a certain number of extra annual leave days for that, but she took some of her own annual leave to go with it. So it was a really nice way to recognise her, but also to help us out of a business problem where we were accumulating too much leave with her and sort of getting her to do that. And ever since we did that, we've put that in place for everybody once they reach certain milestones in the business, and it's actually helped improve our culture, but it's also improved that kind of challenge of trying to get people to take leave when they work hard workers and they're top performers. So think about what can you do a bit differently to look after your top performers, because it's a good way to minimise how often you even have to go through the things we've just spent a bit of time talking to you about. Okay, we are short on time, so Joe, we're going to whiz through these categories of mistake quickly and then go to questions.
Yep. So lack of awareness on underlying issues. Sometimes the problem is a symptom and you are not addressing the underlying cause. So make sure that you really understand what the issues are. Why are people leaving? Why are they not staying? If you feel like you've got a little bit of a revolving door. It might be the role, the manager, the location, the culture. Some of it you can change, some of it you can't, but be clear on what it is. Second is not clearly defining the role. So as we've talked about a lot today, make sure that you are understanding exactly what you need the person to do before you even go to market. 3, lack of planning. If you've got somebody involved in the interview process and they've got annual leave halfway through, you need someone else to keep that going, because the good candidates won't wait. We always say about timeframes, a quick recruit is a good recruit, and that does not mean a rushed recruit. But if you're a job seeker and you haven't heard back from a company you've applied for or interviewed with within a day or two, what are you going to think? You're going to start to think that they're not interested in you and you're on to the next thing. So don't take a week to get back to candidates, especially the ones that you're interested in progressing. And number 4, lack of recruitment and selection training. If you feel you need more on this, talk to Nina or I about that, because we can help with some more detailed recruitment and selection training if that's what you need. Number 5, choosing the wrong approach. So always doing the same thing, popping an ad up on Seek and that's it, will not get you the best of the market. The majority of people looking for work are not necessarily just looking on Seek. Number 6, poor recruitment process and implementation of the process. So once you've planned the process, make sure you stick to it. It's easy to get excited and run away with an offer. Don't forget to let the 2 people or 3 people that you met as well that weren't right for it know, because they might know good people in the future, or in a couple of years' time, they might be a great asset to your business. So make sure that you follow the process. And the last mistake, as Nina has just spoken about in detail, is unsupported induction and training. And if you've done all of this and you've avoided those 6 mistakes above, don't screw it up on the 7th. Make sure that you've got some social events when we're back to normal, or, you know, on Zoom. Make sure that they're meeting people and starting to really feel connected into the business within their first few weeks. And that is your 7 mistakes.
So thank you, Joe. We're going to go to questions. I just want you to think about what are the next steps for you, because it might be different for, you know, the people on the webinar, different things that are going to help. Start small. Don't try and fix everything in one go. This is what we do all day, every day. This is like you trying to tell me how to run a whole hire business when I wouldn't have the first clue potentially. So, you know, so do start small, ask for help, and just keep tweaking as you go. Sometimes that's the best way to do, is just kind of go, what are we going to stop doing? What are we going to start doing? What are we going to continue doing? I'm going to go to questions. I'll just put those up there in case you want more. That they're all on our website, beaumontpeople.com.au. And Sally, over to you for questions.
Thanks, Nina. And we can share those webinars with everybody in our post-webinar follow-up. So the first question, which was actually sent through prior and has also been added to the Q&A, is, I'll just read it out to you and I'll hand over to the two of you. I'm not sure who the best person will be to answer. And I think some of this may have been answered, but if we can just summarise it a little bit. I'm in Western Australia, Perth, so how do we attract applicants when few are applying for jobs? We've got Seek adverts and recruiters looking for us, but we're not getting applicants that are close to what we're looking for. And just as a side note, we're looking for both technical and administration staff, and the process is taking much longer than usual.
Yeah, so really it's everything we've just gone through. So what I would do is actually start by reviewing, where is it falling over? Are you getting no applications at all? In which case you want to go to those first few steps we looked at. You know, is it the planning? Is it what you're looking for is too hard? Is it the quality of your job ads? Is it that you're getting applications and they're not good enough? Then do you need to think about the flexibility with, you know, your expectations, or do you need to look at what else you might be able to offer? So I'd say it's actually about going through those tips that we've got and trying to work out which bit is the first stumbling block for you. It is tough at the moment. So you're not alone in that. It doesn't make it better, but it is tough at the moment, particularly in certain areas. And I mean, even the border closures aren't helping, right? So it's tough to find good people. So there is an element of trying to just keep tweaking the dial to improve it. Joe, would you add anything to that?
Well, yeah, just on that tough thing that we're finding it tough, and this is all we do. We don't have to manage, you know, the rest of our normal day-to-day job. This is our job. But yeah, I think it would be as well maybe looking at competitors, what they're paying. You know, maybe you need to go into Seek as a candidate and see what else is out there. But yeah, making sure that you're understanding at what stage it's happening and what are you offering. So if you've got a great business, sell that business. Yeah.
Okay, and the second question was, do sign-on bonuses or incentives help attract candidates to blue-collar roles?
Sorry, so you froze then, Sally, but I think the question is, do sign-on bonuses work, essentially?
Yeah.
Was that the...
Yes,
yeah.
for blue-collar workers, sorry.
Oh, for blue-collar workers in particular. So I would suggest that, like right, I would suggest that it depends, is the honest truth. So it's back to that thing around different things make work meaningful to different people. Now, it's never going to hurt. As I was giving you the example with the customer service team we work with that have put on some extra bonuses in place, it never hurts. Is it going to be the thing that is ultimately going to make the difference? It might do. But are you looking at all the other things that you can really talk about that you do better as well? Because they're the longer term things that make a difference from an attraction perspective. Joe?
Yeah, I would say as well, it's great for attracting people, but I wouldn't say it does a lot to retain people. It depends what your aim is. If you think you can retain people, it's a great attraction method, but I certainly wouldn't. Yeah, exactly, Jason. Might help to attract, but a problem to retain. And also you're setting the standard. Who do you give it to? Where do you go from there? How do you keep them motivated, engaged? So think long term as well. And I agree with Nina. It may be, it depends.
So the other two questions that came through prior have been covered off in the session, so I won't go through those, but there's a question that's just popped up in the Q&A now saying, how can we engage people in exit interviews?
That's a great question. So definitely do them is my first tip. Get the person that's not their manager to do them. So if you have the luxury of an HR person, that's a great person, but if not, get a different manager to do it, because often they won't necessarily tell their manager or won't be quite as blunt with their own manager as they would be with somebody else. Train the person that's doing the exit interview to be very good at taking the feedback on the chin, because when somebody is leaving, some of the feedback is really accurate, some of it's really useful, some of it's emotion and not accurate, not useful, but the trick is not to react, is just to listen and understand, and then to kind of reflect and digest and go, okay, is that fair? Is that reasonable? Do we want to tweak? Do we want to adjust it? But we use a tool. You can get specific tools. We use a specific tool, similarly, a bit like the attachment tool I was using. There's a detachment one of that we use internally for that, which is great. It helps kind of put a process around it. But when we get the results, what we do is actually sit as a management team and discuss those results and go, okay, are we okay with that? Because actually that's just how our organisation is and it wasn't right. Or is it something we want to tweak and improve as a result? And it can make a big difference to your attraction and retention when you take that feedback on board.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Nina. We have hit just after 2 o'clock, so in interest of everybody's time and other meetings they might need to go to, we'll wrap up. So thank you so much to both you, Nina and Joe, for your time today. It's been a fantastic presentation, and we will share your details and your webinars with all the attendees when we send out the link to the recording and all of that. So please do reach out to Beaumont People if you need any help. So as mentioned, we are recording this, so it will be available, and we'll send that link out probably tomorrow. So our next webinar will be held next month, and October is Safe Work Month, which is an important one for our industry. So our next webinar will be on Wednesday the 20th at 1 p.m, and we're holding a panel discussion on load restraint in the hire industry. So completely different topic for today, but one that we will have members interested in. So this discussion will cover off loading and unloading equipment, as well as restraining loads on vehicles, and the focus will be on the smaller hire equipment being delivered on utes, light trucks, trailers and vans. So we'd hope that people can join us for that one too. So thank you again to you, Nina and Joe, and everybody for attending today. As always, our national office, we're here. We might be remote, but we're still here for you. So if there's anything that we can assist you with, please reach out to us, and thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Bye.